Hey everybody, welcome to Trading the Close. My name is Gareth Soloway, Chief Market Strategist here. Today we're going to get into all the market action, or kind of lack thereof in a way, because volume today was insanely light. Basically 25 million on the SPY, which puts it among the lightest volume in the last multiple year span. Now what's the culprit here? Well, everyone's waiting for Nvidia earnings that are coming tomorrow after the bell. So tomorrow Trading the Close is going to be very interesting. We also have Friday's PCE inflation data. Now, there were some interesting movements today, so we're going to jump into the charts right now. Let's first start with our heat map and our numbers on the day. Dow up 42 points, NASDAQ up 40 points, S&P up 13, and oil down $1.43. Now, the one thing here is, number one, these are all pretty quiet, right? You know, up or down a tenth. This is a tenth of a percent. This is about a quarter of a percent. So very, very light on the markets. But right here, this is more interesting. Oil down to almost 2%. Now, if you were watching yesterday, I gave you the heads up that I pulled the trigger on a short on oil with my smart money commodity service. So obviously they got my exact entry price, all that stuff, but I did give you guys a heads up that the chart to me was a sell short signal, and ultimately today down 2% on oil. So nice move there. Now we are seeing gold today up fractionally on the day, small move there, and Bitcoin, again, you remember my pivot line? Well, guess what the low of the day was on Bitcoin? The pivot line. So we retraced to the pivot line. As of now, we're holding it, which is really important. The bulls, again, the bulls last stand here, they have to hold the line. If they don't hold that line, we get a daily close below that pivot line, trouble is on the horizon for Bitcoin. So we're going to watch that very, very closely. Now, just going over to the heat map here, kind of a mixed bag, right? I mean, just like the markets today, generally neutral to positive. Nvidia did have a little bit of a bounce after yesterday's down move. Apple was around the flat line, Microsoft around the flat line, even Google/Alphabet down 0.6%. That's not a big move. Meta, same thing. And then if you go over here, you can see financials again eking out a little bit of upside, generally net positive, while again retail, Amazon was down about 1%. But overall, this heat map, a mixed bag, which is what the numbers told us today. All right, let's go into the intraday chart of the S&P 500. So what we saw in the intraday today, again, we did have a slightly lower open, and we can see that right down here. A little bit of a lower open, a float up initially, and then basically look at this. I mean, you could just draw this in the rest of the day. It kind of went tighter and tighter and tighter into the end of the day. And that just shows you the lack of volume, lack of conviction in any direction, right? You know, there weren't any big players that were buying massively. There also weren't any big players that were selling massively. It essentially was a quieter day as it went on, and we talked about that at the open in terms of volume. Now, a couple key charts to look at. So number one, Nvidia did get a bounce today after the drop yesterday. The key on Nvidia still remains that it is still below this trend line. But again, the question, and I asked this yesterday to you guys, is this a move up with bullish consolidation, or is this going to get rejected on earnings and go back to this 105 level? After the bell tomorrow, we're probably going to find out. I think Nvidia earnings, by the way, don't come out till about 4:20. So again, I'll be trading those live with the earnings trader guys. You can find that service on verifiedinvesting.com. But nonetheless, Nvidia getting a little bit of a bounce after the little bit of a sell-off yesterday as traders, again, positioning themselves for that big result. Now, a couple other things. So here's your oil chart, guys. Looking at oil, you had your bounce, right? We had a classic bounce right here. That, again, was a 50-50. And just to go over the technicals of this chart again, it was a classic wedge pattern. But if you study wedge patterns enough, you start to recognize things. So when you hit a level, all right, so here we hit it once, twice, and 3 times. All right, here you hit once, twice, 3 times, and 4 times. One of the things to recognize is generally first, second, third hits, you get moves that get pushed back against the trend line. So in this case, push back, push back, push back. Here on the downside, when you hit it the first 3 times, 1, 2, all right, 3. The 4th time, again, is a 50-50. It's 50-50 odds of breaking when you talk probabilities. In this case, we got a bounce, but generally when it hits a 4th time, what do we see happening, right? So like this, Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, it gets a bounce, and then it gets a small bounce, and then the breakdown. That's what I'm angling here for on oil. So I expect oil, again, you got your bounce, and eventually it leads to a breakdown. Downside target for me is probably around the $64 per barrel level. Now, the only way oil is going to 64 is if we get some bad economic news. So this implies, if this plays out, that we will see some poor economic data coming out of the charts or out of the economic data points. Now, looking at gold today, gold again, folks, not a whole lot of movement here, a little bit of flat to upside. To me, this looks like a chart that's hovering, waiting for that PCE data, right? Just like Nvidia is waiting for those Nvidia numbers, gold is waiting for the PCE data to either spike higher with that 2660 target price, right? Or if it gets rejected, where is it going to go? Where do I buy, or where do I look to potentially buy? Right down on this downslope or slight upsloping channel level. That, again, is your buy level. Now, would I be buying up here? No, I wouldn't be, at least not for me. I don't like to pay up. At some point, there'll be a flush in gold. My guess is with the negative divergence that I'm witnessing on the RSI chart, it might be sooner than later. Maybe even on the RSI, we'll see a little bit of a, or I should say on the PCE data on Friday, maybe we'll even see a little bit of a dip. So I'm more waiting for the dip as a swing trader to be a buyer of gold. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have my long-term holdings in gold. I've had my long-term holdings in gold for basically a year and a half at this point. A large position on the long-term side. But on a swing trade basis where we're looking to capture moves like this and then rebuy and push it up and then short, down there, much better to wait patiently until we get the chart set up to come through. Now, looking at Bitcoin again, here's your pivot line, right? Look at the low today, right there, literally to the penny, basically. And again, this pivot line stands out beautifully in terms of, you can see even going back here, this was your high, right? It came up, fell down, and then broke above. You kind of kissed it, broke down, went up, and finally broke out, and now we're coming down to it from the other side. So this level needs to hold. If it doesn't, then it opens up basically a void here where it can come down to this lower level down there. So really important for the bulls to hold the 61,500 level today on a daily closing basis, right? Intraday doesn't matter. I mean, especially with Bitcoin, it can flip around. There could be a one big sell, all those type of things. It's more so on a daily closing basis that really solidifies where that chart was on that day. All right, other than that, we can look at natural gas, which continued to stay a little bit on the weaker side today. If we go to that, you can see, again, just slowly fading to the downside. I do have my buy level isolated down to just below $2 on natural gas if it gets there. And lastly, just touching on silver. Don't want to forget silver for you silver bugs out there. But if we look at silver basically hovering just shy of major resistance. I was just talking to my members in my members-only video for my commodity service and saying, hey, listen, if we can just get a little bit higher, I probably will take my profits on my swing trade, mainly because you've had a big run. And I do think that, again, at some point, if I'm thinking oil's going down, then chances are in the short term, silver is going to come down as well. And so I would just look for that. Hopefully it just gets up a little bit higher. We get to take our profits right up here, and then we can always be a rebuy on a retrace down to the downside here around $26.50, $27. All right, guys, so earnings after hours today, Sentinel-1, Box. These are kind of second-tier companies, not huge major players. But tomorrow after the bell, Salesforce, Nvidia, as well as CrowdStrike. And then on Thursday after the close, we also have Dell earnings. And that Dell chart, I'm going to go over that tomorrow in the game plan. It is actually looking semi-attractive. I will say that on the Dell earnings chart. Have a wonderful rest of the day, folks. Let me get going here. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Take care.